after the sea opened, the people did not arrive at peace. They arrived in the wilderness. Behind them was Egypt. Behind them were chains, taskmasters, Pharaoh, plagues, and the terrifying night when the waters closed over the army that pursued them. But ahead of them was not yet the promised land. Ahead of them was hunger, thirst, fear, and a mountain. According to the Bible, after the Exodus and the crossing of the sea, Moses led the Israelites to a place that would become one of the most sacred and mysterious locations in the entire biblical world, Mount Sinai. It was here that Moses met God. It was here that the 10 Commandments were given. It was here that a group of former slaves became a covenant people. But thousands of years later, one question remains deeply unsettled. Where is Mount Sinai? Is it the mountain now called Jebel Musa in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula? Is it another peak hidden somewhere in the desert? Is it in the land of Midian? Is it in northwestern Arabia? Or has the real mountain of God been lost to time? Tonight, we are going to follow the mystery of Sinai, not only as a place on a map, but as a mountain of fire, fear, law, covenant, and silence. Because the strangest thing about Mount Sinai is this: one of the most important places in the Bible may be one of the hardest to locate. The story begins after deliverance. The Israelites have left Egypt, but they are still learning how to be free. This is one of the deepest truths of Exodus. Freedom does not happen in a single moment. A slave can leave Egypt in one night. But Egypt can remain inside the mind for years. The people have seen miracles. They have watched the sea open. They have watched Pharaoh's army fall. But almost immediately, they begin to struggle. They are thirsty. They are hungry. They complain. They ask whether Moses brought them into the wilderness to die. Again and again, the Bible shows us people who are physically free but spiritually afraid. And that is what makes Sinai so important. The Exodus is not just about escaping from something. It is about being formed into something. Israel is not merely rescued from Pharaoh. Israel is brought to God. The mountain is not an accident. It is the destination of deliverance. Before Moses ever confronted Pharaoh, he had already encountered God at a mountain. When Moses was a fugitive in the wilderness, he saw a bush burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. From that fire, God called his name, Moses, Moses. And God told him that he would return to Egypt and bring the people out. But there was also a sign. God said that when Moses brought the people out of Egypt, they would worship God on this mountain. That promise hangs over the entire Exodus story. The plagues, the Passover, the escape, the crossing of the sea, the journey through the wilderness. All of it is moving toward the mountain. So when the Israelites finally arrive at Sinai, it is not just another stop. It is the fulfillment of a promise given to Moses years before. The fugitive has returned. The people are alive. The slaves are free. And now they stand before the mountain of God. But the Bible does not describe Sinai as peaceful. It describes it as terrifying. There is thunder, lightning, a thick cloud, a sound like a trumpet growing louder and louder. The mountain is wrapped in smoke. Fire descends. The whole mountain trembles, and the people are afraid. This is not the gentle mountain of religious paintings. This is not a quiet place for private meditation. This is a mountain that shakes, a mountain that burns, a mountain that cannot be touched. God tells Moses to set boundaries around it, that the people must not rush forward. They must not break through. The mountain is holy, and holiness, in this story, is not safe. It is powerful. It is dangerous. It is overwhelming. It is the presence of the living God entering the world of human beings. This is why Sinai matters. At the Red Sea, Israel saw God as deliverer. At Sinai, they encounter God as king. At the sea, God broke the power of Egypt. At Sinai, God gives the law that will shape Israel's life. The people are not freed so that they can live without direction. They are freed so that they can live in covenant. And that covenant begins with words. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make idols. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord. Remember the Sabbath. Honor your father and mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not covet. These are known as the 10 Commandments. But in the biblical world, they are more than rules. They are the foundation of a new kind of society. Egypt was built on forced labor. Sinai calls for worship, rest, justice, loyalty, truth, and restraint. Egypt asked, how much can Pharaoh control? Sinai asks, how should a free people live before God? That is the heart of the story. But then comes the historical mystery. Where did this happen? For many centuries, the most famous answer has been Jebel Musa, the mountain of Moses. This mountain rises in the southern Sinai Peninsula near Saint Catherine's Monastery. Pilgrims have climbed it for generations. Monks have lived in its shadow. Christians, Muslims, and Jews have treated the region as sacred. The landscape is powerful. Sharp granite peaks rise from the desert. The valleys are dry and silent. At sunrise, the mountains glow with gold and red light. It is easy to understand why people have looked at this place and imagined Moses ascending into the cloud. Saint Catherine's Monastery, built in the 6th century, helped anchor this tradition. Over time, the mountain near it became identified in the religious imagination as the place where Moses received the law. This does not prove that Jebel Musa is the biblical Sinai, but it explains why the tradition became so strong. Sacred geography often grows slowly. A mountain is remembered. A story is attached. Pilgrims arrive. A monastery is built. Prayers are offered. And after centuries, the place becomes inseparable from the story. For many believers, Jebel Musa is Mount Sinai. But historians ask a different question. Can the tradition be traced all the way back to Moses? And that is where things become difficult. The Bible itself does not give us coordinates. It gives us place names. Wilderness of Sinai, Rephidim, Horeb, the mountain of God. But many of these names are hard to locate with certainty today. Some may refer to regions rather than exact points. Some may preserve older traditions. Some may have shifted in meaning over time. Even the names Sinai and Horeb create questions. In some biblical passages, the mountain is called Sinai. In others, it is called Horeb. Are these two names for the same mountain? Are they different mountains? Is Horeb a region and Sinai a peak? Or do these names come from different ancient traditions that were later woven together? There is no simple answer. That is why the search for Mount Sinai becomes so complicated. It is not only about finding a dramatic mountain. It is about reconstructing ancient roots, old place names, desert water sources, tribal territories, and memories preserved across centuries. Some scholars argue for the traditional southern Sinai location. They point to the strength of the Jebel Musa tradition and the long history of pilgrimage in the area. They also note that southern Sinai contains remote mountain landscapes that fit the spiritual power of the story. But others question whether the Israelites, after crossing from Egypt, would have traveled that far south before turning toward Canaan. They ask whether the route makes sense. They ask about water. They ask about the number of people. They ask about the biblical itinerary. And because the Exodus route itself is debated, the location of Sinai becomes debated too. If you do not know exactly where Israel crossed the sea, it becomes harder to know which mountain they reached afterward. This is why video 2 and video 3 are connected. The Red Sea mystery leads directly into the Mount Sinai mystery. Move the crossing point, and the route changes. Move the route, and the mountain changes. Move the mountain, and the whole map of Exodus begins to shift. Another theory places Mount Sinai closer to Midian. This idea attracts attention because Moses spent years in Midian after fleeing Egypt. His father-in-law Jethro was a priest of Midian. And the burning bush appears while Moses is tending Jethro's flock in the wilderness. If Moses first encountered God near Midian, some argue perhaps Mount Sinai itself was in or near Midian. This has led some people to propose mountains in northwestern Arabia, especially Jebel al-Lawz. The idea is dramatic. It places the mountain across the Gulf of Aqaba. It connects Moses' exile, Midian, and the mountain of God in a single region. It also attracts attention because of claims about darkened mountain peaks, ancient inscriptions, possible altars, and other visible features. But these claims are highly disputed. Many archaeologists and biblical scholars remain unconvinced. Some argue that the evidence is selective. Others say the biblical route does not require Sinai to be inside Midian. Still others point out that impressive-looking features in a desert landscape do not automatically prove a biblical event. A dark mountain peak may be geological. A stone structure may have another explanation. A drawing may belong to a different period. A dramatic landscape may inspire faith, but it does not by itself settle history. This is important. The search for Sinai often attracts sensational claims. Photographs circulate. Videos promise hidden proof. People point to rocks, carvings, caves, and shapes in the landscape. But biblical history cannot be built only on excitement. It requires patience. Context. Dating. Archaeology. Language. Textual analysis. And the humility to say, we do not know yet. That humility matters because the mystery of Mount Sinai is not easily solved. If it were easy, it would have been solved long ago. The mountain does not come with a label. The desert does not preserve every footprint. Ancient camps do not always survive. Nomadic groups leave light traces. Place names vanish. Traditions move. And after thousands of years, even sacred memory can lose its map. But perhaps the most surprising thing is this. Ancient Israel did not seem to return to Sinai again and again as a major pilgrimage center. Jerusalem became central. Zion became central. The temple became central. But Sinai, the place of revelation, did not become the permanent religious capital of Israel. Why? Maybe because Sinai was never meant to be home. It was a meeting place. A wilderness mountain. A place of covenant. A place where God spoke, but not where Israel would settle. The people were not called to remain at Sinai. They were called to carry Sinai with them. The law would travel. The covenant would travel. The memory would travel. The mountain could be left behind because the words given there were meant to shape life everywhere. That may explain why the location faded. The event mattered more than the address. The revelation mattered more than the coordinates. But for modern people, that answer is not enough. We want the place. We want the mountain. We want to stand where Moses stood. We want to look at the rocks and say, here. Here the cloud descended. Here the trumpet sounded. Here the people trembled. Here the commandments were given. There is something deeply human about that desire. Faith wants contact with the ground. History wants evidence. Imagination wants a landscape. And Sinai offers all three, but never in a simple way. The biblical description itself is powerful but mysterious. smoke, fire, thunder, lightning, earthquake, a trumpet sound, a voice. Some have wondered whether these details point to a volcanic event. Could Sinai have been a volcanic mountain? Could fire and smoke describe an eruption? This theory has also led some people to look outside the traditional Sinai Peninsula, especially toward regions with volcanic geology. But again, we must be careful. The Bible uses storm and fire imagery often to describe divine presence. Thunder does not necessarily mean a volcano. Smoke does not necessarily mean an eruption. Fire does not necessarily mean lava. The imagery may be theological, not geological. It may describe the overwhelming presence of God in the language of storm and flame. In the ancient world, mountains were often viewed as places where heaven and earth came close. High places were sacred. Storms on mountains were terrifying. Clouds could hide the summit. Thunder could shake the valley. A mountain could feel like a doorway into another world. Sinai is presented as exactly that kind of place. Not just a rock formation, a meeting point between heaven and earth. But what makes Sinai different is not simply that God appears there. It is that God speaks there to former slaves. This is radical. In the ancient Near East, law was often associated with kings. The king received authority from the gods. The king ruled the people. The king built temples and commanded armies. But at Sinai, the people themselves are brought into covenant. They hear the voice. They tremble. They agree. They become responsible. They are no longer just victims of empire. They are moral agents before God. That is one reason Sinai became so central to biblical identity. The people who were once commanded by Pharaoh now receive commandments from God. The people who once built for Egypt now become a holy nation. The people who once had no rest now receive Sabbath. The people who were treated as property are taught that human life belongs under divine justice. Sinai reverses Egypt. But the story also contains tragedy. Because while Moses is on the mountain, the people wait below. Days pass. The cloud remains. Moses does not return quickly. Fear grows. Impatience spreads. And the people ask Aaron to make them gods who will go before them. Aaron gathers gold. A calf is made. The people worship it. And at the very mountain where they entered covenant, they break covenant. This is one of the most devastating moments in Exodus. The mountain of revelation becomes the place of rebellion. The people who heard the command not to make idols create an idol almost immediately. Moses comes down carrying the tablets. He sees the calf. He sees the dancing. He sees the betrayal. And he breaks the tablets at the foot of the mountain. It is a shocking image. The covenant shattered in stone because it has already been shattered in the heart. This part of the story is essential. Sinai is not only the place where Israel receives the law. It is the place where Israel learns how quickly freedom can collapse into fear, how quickly worship can become idolatry, how quickly people can trade the invisible God for something they can control. And yet, the story does not end with destruction. Moses intercedes. God renews the covenant. New tablets are made. The relationship is wounded, but not abandoned. Sinai becomes a place of judgment and mercy, fire and forgiveness, law and intercession, holiness and patience. That is why the mountain is so powerful. It reveals God, but it also reveals the people. It shows divine holiness, but it also shows human weakness. It gives commandments, but it also exposes how deeply people need grace. So when we ask where Mount Sinai is, we are asking more than a geographical question. We are asking where heaven touched earth in the memory of Israel. We are asking where former slaves first heard what freedom required. We are asking where Moses stood between God and the people. We are asking where a covenant was born, broken, and renewed. Can archaeology answer that? Only partly. Archaeology can examine landscapes. It can test claims. It can study inscriptions, campsites, pottery, routes, and settlements. It can challenge legends. It can correct assumptions. But archaeology may never give us the certainty people want. The real Mount Sinai may be Jebel Musa. It may be another mountain in the Sinai Peninsula. It may be near Midian. It may be somewhere whose ancient name and memory have disappeared. Or it may be that the biblical Sinai is not meant to be reduced to one modern tourist marker. That does not mean it was not real. It means the surviving evidence is incomplete. And incomplete evidence is not the same as absence. But it also means we should be honest. There is no universally accepted proof that one specific mountain is the biblical Sinai. Tradition points strongly to Jebel Musa. Alternative theories point elsewhere. The Bible gives powerful clues, but not a modern GPS location. The desert keeps its silence. And the mountain remains hidden behind layers of faith, memory, geography, and time. Maybe that is why Sinai continues to fascinate us. Because some places are mysterious, not because they are empty, but because they are too full. Sinai is full of thunder, full of fire, full of commandments, full of fear, full of failure, full of mercy, full of questions. And maybe the uncertainty of its location forces us to see something deeper. The Bible does not end by telling us to find the mountain. It tells us to remember the covenant. It tells us to hear the words. It tells us to understand that freedom without moral formation can become chaos. It tells us that escape from Egypt is only the beginning. A people must still learn how to live. That may be the real lesson of Sinai. The journey from slavery to freedom passes through law. The journey from fear to faith passes through trust. The journey from rescue to identity passes through covenant. So where did Moses meet God? Perhaps on Jebel Musa, under the shadow of the mountain now watched by Saint Catherine's Monastery. Perhaps on another peak in the wilderness, lost to maps but not to memory. Perhaps near Midian, where Moses first learned to listen to the voice from the fire. We may not know with certainty, but the story still stands. A mountain in the wilderness, a people trembling below, a prophet ascending into the cloud, a voice speaking from fire, and commandments that would shape the moral imagination of the world. Mount Sinai may be hard to locate, but its impact is impossible to deny. Because wherever that mountain stood, the world was never the same after Moses came down.